found why we are Christians. My name is Kent Philpott, and next to me is my wife, Katie. And we are talking with Sarah Bolme. She's in North Carolina. And this is our second program. We're going to get into sort of what you're up to now and all things you've been through. But I want to ask you about this one little thing on our information gathering form, Sarah, is I asked the question, the best and worst of times, and you kind of combined it all, and it led by the word trusting God. And the first one is to bring you a husband.
Right.
Okay.
I did not get married until I was 30, and I wanted to be married, but I didn't find anybody. So I had to go to really trust God that He was going to bring me someone, and not just go out and find the first person I thought would do, because I really wanted God to bring me someone who was the right fit for me, and He really did. He really did. Edward's a great fit for me.
Yes, Edward and your kids. And that's the second thing, you're having your kids, Talon and Rachel. And we know both of them.
And they are great. You know, you asked me the worst and best of times, and having kids is the best of times. Yes. But having kids can really try you.
Oh,
yes.
And then tell us, you needed to make some money at a particular period in your life there with your family, and you created a thing called Baby Bible Board Books. Wow, what's that?
Well, I think the third thing I said was years of unemployment. So I'll tell you how that sort of happened and how that sort of panned out. But where Baby Bible Board Books came in was when my daughter was born, and she was a baby. She had these little books that were like board books 5 by 5 inches that were of Clifford the Big Red Dog. You probably remember Clifford the Big Red Dog. And she loved them. They had like 5 words to each page, and she loved them, and she started carrying them around. And I said to myself, I don't want my daughter to fall in love with Clifford the Big Red Dog. I want her to fall in love with Jesus. So I started looking for board books for infants that had to do with stories of Jesus. And I had a hard time finding them. Instead, I was finding books with Old Testament stories and those sorts of things. And I wasn't finding stories of Jesus that would do for an infant. So I complained to Edward one day about this. And Edward said to me,
I can imagine.
Well, why don't we create some?
Yay.
And I said, okay, let's do that. So we created some board books. They're called The Stories of Jesus. There's 4 stories about Jesus in them. For infants and toddlers. And we started shopping them around to publishers. Now, you have to understand, my husband was already an author. He wrote science fiction fantasy, and I was also already an author. I had done some self-help books because I was a social worker. So we started shopping them around to Christian publishers. And the Christian publishers said, well, who are you to do this? You know, and so we realized we weren't going to get them published with the publishing house. So my husband said to me, Sarah, let's self-publish these. And I said,
and
what year is this?
Oh, no, because I knew 2 things about self-publishing. One, I was going to have to spend a lot of time learning a lot.
Yes.
And 2, it was going to cost a lot of money because these were board books and we had to print them in China and have them shipped. So we had to do a couple thousand copies.
Now, tell us what year this was?
This was in 2000 and, well, she was born in 2000, so this is basically about 2001 that this process started happening, 2001 to 2002. Yeah, 2001. So I said no. So a few months go by, and my husband comes back to me and says, Sarah, I talked to Pastor about publishing those board books, and he thinks we should do them. And I'm like, oh, no. And then one day I'm just doing daily chores, and I hear God say to me, Sarah, that money that's in the bank, who does that belong to? Now, when I say God says to me, I didn't hear an audible outside voice or anything like that. God talks to people in different ways. And the way he talked to me it's a thought in my head that I know is not my thought. So it's like a thought that comes into my head that I know is not my thought, that I know is pretty, it's realized over the years it's God. So he said, Sarah, that money that's sitting in the bank, whose money is that? Since you didn't work for it. And I said, yours? And he said, I want you to do the board books. So let me back up and tell you how we got the money. Right before my daughter was born, my husband owned stock options in the company he worked with. And that company was purchased by another company right before she was born. And so we got this windfall of money. I took half that money and I purchased a van because I was pregnant and knew we were going to need a bigger car for our family. And the other half I put in the bank because, you know, the experts say you need 6 months of salary in the bank in case you get unemployed. Now, Edward had become unemployed when Rachel was 4 months old. This is before we did the baby Bible. We had the baby Bible board book idea. She was 4 months old. And so we had already gone through a few months of unemployment. So I knew what that was like. So when God said to me, whose money is that? It really, neither of us had worked for it. He had given it to us. And so I said obediently to God, okay, we will do the board books. So then I went to my husband and I said to him, okay, we'll do them, but you're going to get unemployed. You're going to be laid off because God's going to test my resolve to see if I will trust him. You know, use all this money that's in savings. And would you know, not know, but 2 weeks later, Edward was laid off.
Yeah. Oh, no.
And I had made the commitment to do the baby Bible board books, so we continued to go forward, and we created these board books. We self-published them. Well, here's what happened. We started shopping them around to the local Christian bookstores. Because remember, this was early 2000s.
Yes, and there were still such things.
Well, most books are still being bought in bookstores.
Yeah.
And I had read every book I could get my hands on about publishing and marketing a book. But we started taking them to the bookstores, and the bookstore sellers started to say things to us that we had never heard, like, well, are you members of CBA? Are your books in STL? Have you been to RBTE? Are you going to all these things?
All these acronyms.
Heard of, because they were the Christian market. And it became clear to us that the Christian market was very different than the general book market. They had their own distributors, they had their own trade shows, all that sort of thing, that there was no books out there about. Nothing for me to learn from. So at that point, I knew about the general market and how that worked, and that there were these associations for the general market. And so we wanted to start taking our books to the trade shows, but it was very expensive. And so I said to my husband, well, there's these other organizations that do it for the general market. Too bad there's not one for the Christian market. And guess what he said? Let's create one.
We'll make one. Yeah, right.
That's how it all got started.
And God led us to some other small publishers who were doing what we were doing in the Seattle area. And the three of us started Christian Small Publishers Association in 2004. So the Baby Bible board books came out in 2003, and then the Christian Small Publishers Association, which we renamed last year after 15 years to Christian Indie Publishing Association, began in 2004.
Right.
Now, so you had to learn marketing, and I know we've got one edition of your book. Have you got it right there with you?
Yeah. Well, see, what happened was we started Christian Small Publishers Association, and then my husband said to me, you should put everything you've learned in a book so other people can read it and know, you know, what you've learned, since there's no books out there. So in 2006, we brought out Your Guide to Marketing Christian Books. And because it has resources, lots of resources to marketing a Christian book, we update it every few years. And it's an award-winning book. It's now in its 4th edition. And this is the cover for the 4th edition that just came out in February of this year.
I haven't seen that cover.
Yeah, I'm going to have to buy the new edition, Sarah. Well, that's what's good about things like what you've got there, a marketing book, which relies on new information so often, and it has to be updated. And so the same people who bought edition 1, 2, 3 will buy each edition as it comes out.
You know, it's one thing to write a book, and there are thousands of books written pretty much every single day, but it's what do you do now? And that always is the struggle. You might have the best book ever, but if you can't let people know about it, you might as well have not written it at all. And I think this is where you come in.
Right. Actually, Kent, right now in 2018, there were 4,200 books self-published every day in America. So over
4,200.
4,000, oh, that's only self-published books. We're not talking traditional published books on top. So, you know, the number of books published every day is probably over 5,000 in the United States. So you have a lot of competition for a book. But marketing a book, it takes work to market a book. And whether a book is published by a traditional publisher or self-published, the author is expected to market it in today's world. And that's what we do with Christian Indie Publishing Association, is we give authors and small publishers information and tools for marketing their books so that they can have success in spreading the word.
And there are lots of like how to do indie publishing people who are proliferating in the online world and the speaker circuit world, and they of course always have all these marketing techniques that focus on social media and emailing and this and that and the other thing, and if I've heard it once, I've heard it a dozen times.
It gets a little discouraging. We have our publishing house, Earth and Vessel. I think this is our 21st year, and we've published a lot of books, but we don't sell very many because we have a hard time marketing, and even with knowing what we do and taking advantage of everything, it's still difficult. And I would just like to give the message that for people who write books, don't give up. And if you sell 50 books, consider it a bestseller.
Well, you know what I tell people is if God has called you to write something, He has a purpose for what you're writing. And even if only 10 people read it and are touched by it, then God's purpose has gone forth. But there's always a purpose. If God lays something on your heart, He's got a purpose, and His purpose will be fulfilled.
Right. And we love to come to the shows, and you have book signings, and we sit there, and we have to have 50 copies of the book. And Sarah, you're right there, and sometimes one of your kids, and we sign books, and people sign up, and they want the book.
They want the book.
Yeah, they want the book.
Most people sell books by word of mouth. We hear about something new from our friends and family, and they tell us, oh, you got to read this. Oh, check this out. And we go learn about something new that way. So that's the main way. And that's why some things pick up so much, because people are saying, ooh, this is great. This meets a need in my life. I want you to see it.
One of the things I like about going to the conventions and the shows with you, Sarah, and the Christian Indie Publishing is you meet Christians from all over the world. Nobody asks what church you go to, what your denomination is. They're from all over the world, and we're all there because we're all just Christians.
Yeah.
Right.
And we don't worry about what your group is or what your particular theologies or doctrines are. We're there because we're gospel preachers and we're followers of Jesus. And that's the exciting thing about going to this. I can hardly wait to be in Nashville coming up, Sarah.
The Gaylord Opry House.
Now, couple things, Sarah. Tell us a little bit more about CIPA and how people get a hold of you. How is it that people find you? I mean, there's going to be some people watching the program who say, this is exactly what I want to find. How could I get a hold of Sarah Bolme and CIPA? What would you say?
Go to the website at christianpublishers.net. Christian Publishers with an S.net, and all the information about the association is there, the benefits of membership. You can sign up right on the website.
And you have good partners.
We have over 240 members that are, some are small publishers.
Sarah, 248?
240 something.
When we started, it was just a little, when we were with you, just a little over 100.
Yeah.
So you more than doubled since we've known you.
Yes.
Good.
Wow.
And you have a lot of good partners now, people who are printers or designers or book cover specialists or editors, things like that.
Yes, and we have a lot of ways to help people save money
Website.
when they're publishing a book. I mean, the entry to publishing a book is really low, which is why there's so many self-published books today, because it doesn't cost much. When we first started Christian Indie Publishing Association, we would have people contact us who had done a Christian book, who told us they had to take a second mortgage out on their home to publish. And then they had thousands of copies in their garage that they were trying to get rid of.
Yes.
And that's no longer the case with print on demand. You can publish one book, just one copy, and you have a book.
That's possible, yes.
We did that a sad day a couple years ago. I filled up my pickup truck with books that we had printed, runs of 2,000-3,000, and I had to take them to the dump. It was a sad
It would
day.
have made good fuel for somebody's fire. Oh,
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Things have changed. What would you say, Sarah, was a major change that you've seen in Christian publishing from the days you started until now?
Well, I think there's a couple. The main one is the growth of self-publishing.
Yes.
Has just phenomenally grown. When we started, it was just starting because print on demand had just come, but most people didn't know about it.
Print on demand, wonderful.
Self-publishing really started to take off in about 2012. You see, in 2016, there were 600,000 books that were self-published that year. In 2017, there were 1 million self-published that year. In 2018, 1.5 million were published. So you can see how it is just growing exponentially. That is the biggest thing, because when we started, there was such a stigma for self-published books, like, oh, you're self-published.
Yes.
And nobody in the Christian market really wanted to touch it. It was really difficult to get people to, the booksellers to look at it, for people to order it, that sort of thing. And over time, as it's shifted and there's more and more books being self-published, and actually the thought right now is possibly at least 1 out of 5, if not 1 out of every 4 books purchased is a self-published book. They're more accepting. It's no longer, you're self-published.
Oh, they're catering to it now. The big, not the publishers themselves, but the buyers are not as stigmatized by the lower value issue, and obviously Ingram being the biggest of the distributing houses for published materials, has shifted a lot of their effort over to the Spark side, which is specifically geared for independent people, and then they also have a bigger Christian catalog subset.
Right. The second big change that we've seen over the years is the book buying. It's moved from mostly, when we started 16 years ago, mostly in stores, to now almost most of the books are published. The majority of books are purchased online.
Yes.
So, Amazon is probably the biggest seller of books, period. They sell over half of all books sold.
Everything else
in the United States, and 80% of ebooks sold, So yes. I think that's been another huge shift for authors who are publishing independently. They don't have to get their book in a store to sell it. They can get it online and still get people to know about it and purchase it online.
We have literally closed down our online book selling store because there's no point in it to do it ourselves.
Now, I know that there's a big jump in audiobooks. They've taken a larger and larger share of the market, the audiobooks, and of course the ebooks.
Yes.
What would you say about ebooks and audiobooks?
Well, audiobooks and ebooks. Here's what happened. In about I remember in 2009 and 2010, when experts started to say by 2012 ebooks would be 25% of the book sales. And they became 25% of the book sales in 2012. But then they predicted that they were going to overtake print books by 2016, and that never happened. Ebooks are still only about 25% of all book sales. Audiobooks have been growing exponentially in the last few years, since people can now just download the audiobook. They don't have to buy the CDs anymore. But still, audiobook sales are not even 25% of the total book sales yet. They're still lagging behind ebooks.
Is it because they're expensive?
Yes, I think so. But I think as we have a society that's becoming more and more audio and visually focused and less, print word focused, that those audiobooks are going to continue to grow.
Yes, we're doing them. Actually, Kent is doing audiobooks because, as we know, he's got a good voice for it, and it's nonfiction, and so the ability to just have the one voice
Right.
it makes it easier to do an audiobook.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an exciting time, I think. Even with the disappearance of the brick and mortar bookstores that we've noticed, but I think that they're going to make a comeback, the brick and mortars. What's your opinion about that?
They may and they may not. I don't know. The millennials buy everything online, and millennials are now the biggest consumer group, and they do a lot of their shopping online. A lot of millennials even do their grocery shopping online. They don't even go to the grocery store. So, yeah.
I'm looking for a combination brick and mortar, a place you can get some coffee, some pastries, you can sit around, and make it more of a gathering, community gathering place, as well as a bookstore, and
Right.
And so on. All right, Sarah, we have just a little bit more time here now. We've got 6.5 minutes left, and I want to move to the last part of the sheet that you sent to us, and you have something recently that you feel that God has called you to.
Yeah.
Could you talk to us about this?
Sure. A few years ago, probably longer than a couple of years ago, probably about 4 years ago, God started calling me to start doing silent prayer retreats, personal silent prayer retreats, just to get away from the noise of the world and just to be able to listen to Him. And I didn't really obey until about 2 years ago, but it's changed my life. It really has changed my life in that it has reduced my stress. Just going 2 or 3 times a year, a weekend away, spending it with God in silence, not talking, just listening and being, no media, no internet, nothing, has really just reduced my stress overall in my life and made me more aware of God's presence on a daily basis when I come back to the city and I come back to all the noise and everything that, tends to get in the way of hearing from God, being aware of God. And through that, He has led me more into wanting to get involved in healing prayer and inner healing prayer. And so I've joined an organization called the Order of St. Luke, which is an interdenominational, non-denominational group that focuses on teaching people how to do healing prayers. And they have conferences and local chapters and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Wow. Now, you call it the Order of St. Luke.
That's correct.
How do you think they got that name?
Why
St. Luke, not St. Mark?
Because he's the physician.
Well,
he's the physician. He's the physician.
Oh, that's right. He's the physician.
Luke was the physician.
Okay. Well, I was when I saw this, read this, Sarah, just this morning. I was stunned by it because I would like to see in our little church an emphasis on healing. Back in the Jesus people, we did a lot of that. I mean, laying hands on, anointing with oil, and asking God to directly heal, and seeing dozens of actual, real healings, and not of psychosomatic illness, but real organic disease and problems.
But I think it can heal mental health issues. Not like if you have anxiety, healing prayer can help with that. If you have trauma from your past, healing prayer can help with healing the mind also.
Yes,
Right.
You're right.
Probably that's the most effective place that it heals, don't you think?
I think
There's the physical healing, biological, but there's probably the greatest need today is in the area of mental illness.
Yeah, the emotional.
mental illness. And I know you have a lot of experience in that because you say, I have over 25 years experience in providing mental health therapy.
That's correct.
Can you give us a little bit of an idea? We've just got a little under 3 minutes. Someone came to you and said that they were really suffering with stress and anxiety. How would you approach it, Sarah?
Well, that's a broad topic.
I know. You got 2 minutes.
In my practice, I deal with mind, body, and spirit. And one of the things that we are seeing today, Kent, is that millennials just are not in touch with their spirit side. Only 49% of millennials say they're Christians. A lot of them say they're nuns. And a lot of them don't believe even in a spirit side. They believe that nothing happens after you die. They don't understand that they have this spirit. And yet they're struggling with these existential questions of the spirit. Questions of, why am I here? What's my purpose? What's the human race about? Why do we even exist, right? And some of that is causing some of their depression and anxiety because they haven't attended to the spirit. So in my work, I try to get people to attend some to the spirit just to open them up, possibly, to being aware that there is a God out there.
Okay. Wow. I would think that probably the people that are suffering the most would be younger people today. The teenage, the 20s, the 30s, I would think that they might be more greatly impacted than by people who've been around a little bit longer. I don't know.
They really are, and a lot of it has to do with this fear of the global climate, this global warming, and they really feel like the Earth isn't going to be around in a couple years, or it's not going to be a place where they want to live or have kids. And so it's hard to see these kids that don't have hope for the future. They don't have a positive hope.
Exactly right, Sarah.
Really?
Wow.
That's.
And I see here that I see how you apply this. Your favorite verse, I'm looking at it, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. For a long time, that was my favorite verse too. That was my number one verse. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. It just seems like that is a formula for good mental health.
It is.
It is a good formula for mental health.
The trust part is the hard part.
Well, Sarah, Katie and I are going to say goodbye. We'll be seeing you coming up in Nashville at Gaylord's Opryland. I think I said that right. Getting ready for another NRB conference and signing books and having a lot of fun.
All right.
All right, Sarah. Thanks for being with us. Much appreciated. Say hello to Edward and Rachel and Talon, and we'll see them too.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. You've reached the end of our program, Why We Are Christians. You can go to YouTube and check out the programs that we have. And we invite you to, if you have an interest in looking for getting your books out there, contact Sarah, and in a moment you're going to find how to get to the link to her website. All right. So long.